Would you not say, Joe, we are absolutely united in feeling we are living through a terrible time from a parliamentary point of view?
Well, yes, I would say that, but I think that's because certain unpleasant characters are being thrown to the fore, and they're very, very easy to hate. And I'm kind of thinking, why bother with a milkshake when you could get some battery acid? That's just me, and it's all right. I'm not going to do it. It's purely a fantasy, but I think milkshakes are pathetic. I honestly do. Sorry.
0345 6060 973, 11:07. Stephen Knight is a free speech advocate and host of the Godless Spell Checker podcast, and Kevin Maguire is associate editor of the Daily Mirror. Good evening to you both.
Good evening.
Thank you for your time. Stephen, let me start with you. Is this a joke taken out of context, and is the criticism of Joe Brand fair?
I certainly think the criticism's fair. I think everyone's entitled to be upset or offended or to say it's wrong-headed or even irresponsible in the political climate today to sort of make jokes about throwing acid at politicians. But I think where you've got to draw the line is when you call for police intervention. And regardless of the context, I think she should be able to say what she thinks and joke about it without finding herself hauled in front of the police. I just think it's curious as well that figures such as Nigel Farage and Jared Batten, who sort of self-style themselves as defenders of free speech, and, you know, going for this sort of anti-PC culture, of being the first to call for police intervention for the sake of a joke.
Let me ask Kevin Maguire something that I never thought I would ask you, Kevin. Do you agree with Nigel Farage?
Well, I think she shouldn't have said it. I think it's an unfunny joke. The programme is called Heresy, so it's you basically say what you wouldn't really do. And she does say it's purely a fantasy. She's not going to do it. However, in the current climate, I think it's irresponsible to talk about throwing acid in somebody's face, not just because there have been lots of attacks, particularly in London, with acid, but also politicians are being abused and attacked. We did have the assassination of Joe Cox. Another Labour MP was targeted for assassination, but a mole inside the far-right group National Action prevented that happening. MPs are being abused at an unprecedented level.
So it's not even, it is no longer acceptable, given the climate that we're in, to even joke about attacking in any way a politician.
I think you have to be very careful how you do it. She is a comedian. She has meant it to be a joke. Maybe she said she wanted to get in a steamroller and flatten him or something. Something that you wouldn't actually do. That may be acceptable. But we saw him milkshaked. I thought that was wrong. It also is counterproductive when it distracted attention at the time from questions about the Brexit Party's finance. The Electoral Commission has said they're open to abuse. And he is an elected politician. Like, I'm no fan of Nigel Farage, far from it. But I think Jo Brand is good. She is again. I stress she's a comedian, and I do think it's ridiculous to get the police involved. That would waste their time.
Really? Do you think it was ridiculous to get the police involved with Danny Baker's tweet?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah?
He was sacked by the BBC, and the police found there was no case to answer, but some police time would have been wasted on that. I wish people would stop shouting, get the police. Let the police go and deal with crimes where they exist. This is a bad joke. It isn't a crime.
Stephen, do you think that comedians are going to be worried now about making these kinds of jokes, that this is now off limits to a comedian?
Yeah, I think they already are worried. I think there's already been a chilling effect on free speech because of the public reaction and the online hate mobs that are whipped up over the most innocuous of comments. I'm not saying that Jo Brand's comment was innocuous, but I also think there's something to be said about this this idea of incitement, the idea that it's dangerous for her to say these things in the current political climate. I think that really does take away the idea of personal agency, as if the British public are autonomous robots just waiting for the mere suggestion to whip them into sort of a violent frenzy. I think it remains a joke, even if people were to do the things that she's described in the joke.
Did you laugh at it?
No, I didn't find it funny, but I don't need to find it funny. No, jokes aren't for everyone. You have the option to not laugh, for instance. You have the option to return fire with some criticism.
If you do laugh at it, you're not laughing at the idea of a politician having acid chucked at them. You're laughing at the idea of what?
Some people may be finding it funny, the idea of acid being thrown at politicians. Some people have a very dark sense of humour, and that's their right. I don't think we can say to people what you must and mustn't find funny. Like I say, where I draw the line again is when you try and bring police into the equation and try and criminalise jokes and speech and opinions as risible as some people might find them.
Kevin, I wonder whether you think the chilling effect on comedians is extended elsewhere, that people worry so much about the lack of agency, apparently, is the point that Stephen was making, that the incitement to hatred is so fast now that there's going to be a loon somewhere who takes it as a kind of gateway drug to doing what they want.
Well, that's possible. I don't feel free speech is being chilled. Just look at Twitter or go around Westminster and hear what is shouted at.
But isn't
many mobs?
Isn't the argument of it being chilled not the fact that people can't say what they want to, but that on some instances, like the Danny Baker tweet, possibly like this, the police are getting involved?
Yeah, and I think that's wrong, and they shouldn't be involved, and people should stop wasting police time. But I also think people like Nigel Farage, who, let's be honest, isn't Anne of Green Gables, and has been inciting hate himself, and I thought it was incredibly irresponsible for him to say he might don khaki, pick up a rifle, and head for the front lines himself if he didn't get his way.
Wasn't that a joke?
Yeah. Well, it was a bad joke. Now, should we go and get the police, like Nigel Farage, if he wants the police set on Joe Brand? Do you think the police should be set on Nigel Farage for saying he might don khaki, pick up a rifle and head for the front lines? It can work both ways. Nigel, I have sympathy with it. I think this was a bad joke. I don't think Milkshakes should have been thrown on. Heckle him, yeah, absolutely. Shout at him if you want, within reason. That's all part of the rough and tumble democratic politics. But he himself, all of a sudden, just setting himself up as a martyr is a bit rich. When there's a picture of hate, he has spread division. We've seen a spike in attacks on people in Britain after the referendum, and he posed that appalling breaking point poster from a racist Leave.eu campaign, which was refugees who couldn't have got into Britain anyway. He's misrepresented many people down the line himself. I think we need to cool it, but those people like Nigel Farage have to cool it themselves instead of just pointing the finger at Joe Brand. If he looks in the mirror, Nigel Farage, you'll see someone who has been very inflammatory in British politics.
Stephen, the BBC has defended Joe Brand where it didn't defend Danny Baker. What do you think the difference is?
It's very difficult to say. Some might suggest that there's left-wing bias at the BBC, and it does make you wonder what the result of the BBC's response would have been if somebody on the political right had made the same comments as Joe Brand about somebody on the left, for instance. So
Kevin, do you think that's fair? Do you think there is a bit of bias involved in all of this?
I wouldn't say so. What I would argue is, look, this was a comedy program, and it was clearly a joke, a bad joke, a dangerous joke, a joke that shouldn't have been made, but it was a comedy program. Danny Baker tweeting what is considered to be incredibly racist, a monkey when the topic was a child of mixed heritage. Some people might say he shouldn't have been sacked. I understand that argument. I thought it myself until many of my black friends pointed out how grotesquely painful and hurtful it was to them, because they've lived with racism all their lives. And I don't think Danny Baker is a racist, but what he did was.
Stephen, just finally, you hear from comedians who make jokes about tough subjects, shall we say, jokes sometimes about things like the Holocaust or about death and murder and all the rest of it. Do you think that there is anything that should be off limits?
In terms of topics, no, but it often depends on the joke. and the target of the joke and the way it's delivered. No subject should be off limits for comedy or any other art. In fact, I mean, we're discussing it now on the radio, and, you know, that's all well and good. But suddenly when you put it in the arena of humour, we say that you're not allowed to discuss it. Well, that's the way a comedian does discuss things. They just choose a different set of tools to approach it and pick at it. And you've always got the right to be offended, not listen, not laugh, say something back, or go and do something else with your time. The idea that everything should be sanitised as not to offend or cause any upset is a very, very dull prospect to me, one I wouldn't really like to live in.
Stephen, I'm grateful. Thank you. Stephen Knight, free speech advocate, host of the Godless Spell Checker podcast. And Kevin Maguire, thank you to you too. Kevin Maguire, associate editor of the Daily Mirror.